Good morning and welcome to today's Iron Path webinar. The title for today is Building Your Own Webinar Series, 7 Ingredients for Success. My name is Ted Hulsey and I'm your host for today's event. A couple housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode and I strongly encourage you to ask questions as we go along. Let's look first at some just introductory information. First, who is Iron Path? Iron Path, we provide marketing and sales services to MSPs and growth-oriented vendors. I'm Ted Hulsey, I'm the founder of the firm, and I'm uniquely qualified to talk about today's topic because throughout my career, I've literally produced hundreds of webinars for larger companies and for MSP partners. So I'm gonna really try to distill all the things I've learned through that process in today's webinar and share it with our MSP and vendor guests for today's event. Let's look at the agenda. In about 30 minutes, we're going to review a couple key topics. I'm going to first touch on some of the marketing challenges that MSPs face when they're standing up and starting their own webinar program. We're going to touch on why webinars make sense for any sort of company in the B2B space, but specifically technology companies like MSPs. Why do webinars make sense? How can they help you achieve your marketing goals? How can they help you drive more leads? And then I'm going to change the conversation and switch into what I call the 7 ingredients for success with your webinar program. And then we'll end with your questions. So first of all, what are some of the marketing challenges that MSPs and growth-oriented vendors face? First of all, content is a challenge. Content is king. Content is really the fuel that's really gonna drive your entire marketing program in a B2B type company. They call it content is king, and the reason for that is because that's really what prospects and clients desire. There's an insatiable demand for knowledge and information to help business decision makers solve problems, to help them grow their business, help them reduce their costs, help them to eliminate or minimize risk in their business. And if you're producing a big amount of content for your prospects and clients, it's going to really help you drive engagement from those important audiences. Another big challenge for organizations, no matter your size, is you want to establish thought leadership in the marketplace. You want your clients to look to you for advice. You want to drive up the levels of trust, and you want prospects to view you as an expert. And so your marketing is really the way you establish that thought leadership and credibility in the marketplace. And last but not least, we need to drive leads. Developing content and developing thought leadership is really not going to get you very far if your prospects and clients don't actually engage with the content, show you they're viewing it, download your content, watch your videos, come to your webinars. And whenever they take any of those actions, it's going to create a lead for your sales organization to follow up and convert that interest into new revenue. So those are all the marketing challenges that businesses, especially MSPs, are faced with. And how can webinars help? Webinars are one of the most important components of the B2B marketing mix. And the reason for that is because they work. A couple statistics are in store. This data comes from research that LogMeIn did. And what it found is that 70% of marketing and sales leaders point to webinars as one of their best sources for qualified leads. At the same time, when you talk to decision makers in organizations, webinars are how we all go about learning about new trends in the industry, new software tools that we can employ, new ways, new tricks of the trade, new best practices we can employ. So we're all hungry for new information and knowledge and expertise, and those brands that give us a continuous stream of interesting content, whether it's delivered via webinars or podcasts or white papers, those are going to be the brands that we gravitate towards and engage with. And so decision makers they are registering for webinars, they're attending webinars, they're listening to them on demand, they're attending live, they're doing all of the above. And so if you're in a leadership position in an organization and you're trying to find ways to increase client engagement, drive more leads from prospects, webinars really have to be part of your toolkit. So let's talk about, okay, so if we establish that webinars work and that there's a huge desire and demand for educational content, how do we build a webinar program? The reality is, my main overarching advice is start small. Start somewhere. Put a stake in the ground and define a strategy for your organization to start producing webinar content. And what I'm going to do in the next couple minutes is give you what I would consider like the 7 most important ingredients to develop a successful webinar program. So, ingredient number 1, you have to have compelling content. That should seem obvious, but I think over the years what I've seen is that people often think it's about having the biggest email list or having the most aggressive sales program to promote your webinar, and really none of that's true. If you're a big company or a small company, if you don't have compelling content, your prospects and your clients are not going to gravitate towards you, and they're not going to gravitate towards your content. So why is content compelling? Content is compelling if it's educational content. Nobody wants to be sold to. So you can't create webinars that are really sales pitches around your products and services. That stuff just is boring. People hate to be sold to. So really flip it around, put yourself in the shoes of your prospects and your clients, and understand that they want to solve all these challenges that they have in their business world, and give them free information, educational content, and make that the foundation of your webinar program. I want to point out a book recommendation, a book by a gentleman by the name of Jay Baer, and his book is called Utility. I highly recommend you look up Jay on YouTube and listen to some of his videos. But the book Utility was subtitled Why Smart Marketing is About Help, Not Hype. And his whole thesis in the book is, if you consistently in your marketing are looking to provide free educational and helpful content to your public, your marketing tactics are going to be magnetic to your target market, because people are going to keep coming back to you again and again because you're providing them informative content. So that's really the whole foundation of the book Utility. It's putting the informational needs of your clients and prospects at the center of what you're doing. And when you're creating webinar content, it's the same foundation. You need to tap into that educational drive and the desire to help your prospects understand all of their business challenges and give them free information to help them solve their problems. Now, the next question is how do you figure out what you should talk about? What should the topics be for your webinars? And the reality is you just need to ask. You need to do research, and you need to ask really 2 different audiences. On the one hand, you need to ask the clients themselves. So it's perfectly valid. There's an MSP I work with, and he does something he calls an ask campaign. And all he does is he sends out a very simple email, and he asks people what they want to hear about. And he gets a pretty good response rate on that email, and people tell him, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I would like to learn more about that. And he just keeps a log of all the responses to his ask campaigns, and he gets responses, and then he builds his editorial calendar based upon those responses to his question. The other person to ask are the folks on your sales team. Every day, account managers and account executives who are working with new prospective clients, they get peppered with questions. And what you'll find is that there are questions that get asked and asked and asked over and over again by the prospects. What you want your marketing to do is to really answer those questions. The whole art of marketing, or one of the key arts of it, is just creating one-to-many conversations where you're answering those questions from your prospects in an interesting and engaging sort of way. So ask your sales team what questions they're getting on a repeated basis. I have an example here. So one of the things I do with my clients is I help them deliver or develop rather editorial calendars. And an editorial calendar can help you with your webinar program. It can help you with your blogging program. It can help you with the development of more high value assets like white papers and ebooks. And a good way to go about building an editorial calendar is to simply sit down with your sales folks and list, and other leaders in the organization who are involved in the sales process, and list out all the questions you get on a repeated basis. And I recently did this with a client, and we had one of their VCIOs, we had a VCISO, we had the CEO of the client, and a handful of other folks in the process. And there were like 5 people. And all 5 people sat down in front of a spreadsheet and just started rifling through and listing out all the questions they get throughout the sales process or in engagements with their existing clients. And in no time, we had 150 questions listed out. What we did next is we then took all the questions, sorted them or categorized them, then sorted them by category. And what really bubbled to the top were interesting topics that we could address with our white papers, ebooks, blogs, and webinars. So just by answering the questions that repeatedly come up in the sales process. So that's a great way to build your editorial calendar, and it's a great way to power your webinar program with educational, interesting content. And then you might ask, well, is there something unique about the technology industry or about the business challenge of MSPs why webinars are so valuable? And I think that you can conclude that the answer is yes. The world of software and technology is super fast moving. It's very complex. There's many different nuances and complexities, in the technology world, and that's why webinars are so valuable, because you can kind of compartmentalize these different topics and go deep on a particular topic with a webinar and produce something that's educational and valuable on a given topic. And so what you see is more research from LogMeIn. What you see is that in the software and technology space, webinars are one of the most common B2B tactics used, especially when you compare it to other industries. Okay, ingredient number 2 is don't go it alone. When you're creating content, when you're creating a compelling webinar program, it's essential to tap into your overall ecosystem and community. Number 1, I can't encourage this enough, get your clients involved in the process. Your clients are your best advocates. They're the ones who say it the best. Your clients will drive a high level of trust in your content. And your clients and prospects, they want to hear from their peers. And so that's a great reason to invite your clients into panel discussions, into interviews, into success stories or case study type webinars, because they'll provide a very genuine form of content that will be well received by your audience. The second best practice in the don't go it alone theme is tap into industry experts. Clients really want to hear from government agencies, people doing research, people with data about the challenges in the industry. So because it builds instant credibility, and it brings a neutral third party to the table in the conversation. So some examples of industry speakers that I often help my clients bring into their webinar programs would be, we do a lot of security programming with the cybersecurity team at the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. We also invite folks from the FBI, from the cybercrime teams, to come and share their experiences with combating cybercrime and the best practices businesses need to follow to stay safe. You can also invite researchers, professors, people from academia, anybody who's a kind of a neutral third party who has no sales agenda but has a lot of knowledge to share. They're great people to bring to the conversation as well. And then last but not least is joint ventures. Look at your ecosystem and realize that the vast majority of companies out there are not your competition. There are MSPs or other kinds of service providers that will maybe complementary to your business. They may not be in your own backyard, They may have a specialty that you don't actually have. For example, one of the things we often do with MSPs is we invite a pen tester to come speak on cybersecurity topics. And the reason we do that is MSPs and pen testers really have kind of a different depth in terms of how they work with clients. And there's a lot of collaboration and referrals between those two types of service providers. So there's no competitive friction. An MSP can invite a pen tester. They can really go deep on the topic of cybersecurity, bring some great war stories to the table, and you end up with a really compelling piece of content. Another example would be for MSPs to work with your vendors. Your vendors have tons of experts in their staffs in the form of product managers, systems engineers, solution architects. And again, the vendor folks are there to help you, the partner, succeed. So tap into that vendor ecosystem and get their experts into your webinar programming. The third ingredient is you have to think and understand your audience strategy. And really, this is not terribly complicated, but I think a lot of people think about this backwards. A lot of people originally will try to start a webinar program because they're looking for new leads or new logos. They're trying to use their webinar program as a way to generate net new accounts for their business. And that's totally valid. The challenge is that the lower hanging fruit is really using the webinar methodology to educate your existing clients. And it's easier to get existing clients to attend your events than it is to get somebody who doesn't really know you or your brand. And this is just natural human nature. When you have folks who are on your email list, they're already doing business with you, they know and trust you, you're whitelisted on the in their email security system, so your email invitation can get through. For all of these reasons, it's a heck of a lot easier to get clients into a webinar than it is to get a net new prospect into a webinar. So this doesn't have to be about choosing between clients or prospects. What you can do is the content that you're going to develop for clients is going to be just as relevant for people who are warm prospects in your pipeline and for those net new leads that you're going to generate with your webinar program as well. It's just important to think about like as kind of like a pyramid. Like the base of your audience is going to be your existing clients, and then you want to definitely sell your webinar program into those folks that are in the sales process already, that are getting to know you better, are close to closing. And this might just be that last kind of engagement they need before they decide, you know what, this is the company I really want to do business with because they are experts in what they do. And then your webinar program with the right sales and marketing outreach and muscle will also generate net new leads. And you combine that all together, and then you have a really solid audience strategy. Okay, ingredient number 4 is what are the tactics to get butts in seats? And how do you promote your webinar program? So there's no question, email is the #1 way to get registrants for your webinar program. It all starts with that list. So every MSP or growth-oriented vendor, you need to be cultivating an opt-in email house list that contains your clients, your warm prospects, and those prospects that have given you permission to email them. It's not the sort of thing that you can just wave a magic wand and have this magical list overnight. You have to build the list over time. It takes time. But it's one of the most important resources in your marketing is that opt-in email list. And that's going to be one of your main tools to promote your webinar program. And according to research from LogMeIn, roughly 57% of all registrants for your webinar program are going to come from your warm, curated, opted-in house list. But that's just 57%. The really important point is there's numerous other tactics you can follow to get registrants to your events. You can promote your events on social media. You can write about them with a pre-event blog, for instance, with a call to action to register. So you can tease it in your blog. You can feature recordings of your webinars after you've done them and blog about them down the road. And again, that just creates this virtuous cycle of attention around the content you're creating. You should showcase them in your newsletters. I mean, I think everybody who publishes a newsletter struggles with, well, hey, what are we going to put in the newsletter? Webinars, either on demand or upcoming, is a great piece of content to include in your newsletter. And then there's other tactics like SMS and doing outbound telemarketing to promote your webinars. Like a really good tactic I really endorse is especially for existing clients, is leveraging your account managers to do proactive outreach for your webinar program. You know, I think a lot of account managers struggle with the reality of, hey, there are existing accounts, I'm supposed to have engagement. What do I call them and talk to them about? Call them up and say, hey, well, we're hosting this educational webinar to educate our clients on what pen testing is and how it works and why pen testing should be part of your cyber defense strategy as an organization. It's free to come. You know, that's the sort of free educational content your clients will value and find, and they will register. But sometimes it takes that personalized grassroots outreach by an account manager to get the word out to your existing clients. So don't overlook the power of the telephone, just doing warm grassroots outreach to your existing clients to tell them about the upcoming webinars you're doing. And then the other point I want to make is think small. Don't obsess about the numbers originally, because I think one of the biggest barriers to people building a webinar program is how challenging it is in the early days of your program with the numbers. You do your initial marketing, your clients aren't expecting you to have a webinar program. They may, you know, you normally need to tell somebody 10 times before they take action on something. And so it's going to take time and rhythm for you to really drive awareness that you have a monthly or a quarterly webinar program. So just be patient and know that it's gonna start small and it's gonna grow over time, and you're gonna get more registrants over time, and you're gonna get more on-demand views over time, and these things are gonna reinforce themselves. And then, you know, 6 months out, 12 months out, you're gonna be amazed about how many people are engaging with your webinar content. So just don't panic in the early days around the numbers. Just be confident that it will grow from strength to strength and the numbers will go up, and be confident that you're creating content where you're having a one-to-many conversation with your clients and prospects. You're recording the sessions, you're going to have it on demand, you're going to be able to put it on your YouTube channel, and all of this is goodness. So just don't get too worried about the numbers in the early days. Ingredient number 5 is you need to pick a platform. And the reason I say it's a platform is because one of the biggest challenges with webinars is not the recording of an audio-visual multimedia presentation. There are dozens of tools that allow you to do a video conference or to sit in front of a camera and a microphone and record something. That's not the hard part. Teams can do it, Zoom can do it, GoToWebinar can do it. The hard part with webinars is really all the stuff before the event and all the stuff after the event. And that's why I really speak of a webinar platform, because as a marketer or a leader in a business who's engineering a webinar program, you have to think about the whole pre-event registration and promotion process and all the post-event follow-up process, you know, the surveys, the follow-up emails sent on an automated basis to the people who registered but failed to attend, all that sort of stuff. You have to think about all of those different elements of the platform. I personally recommend GoToWebinar. I think it's the industry leading solution for small and medium businesses to produce a webinar program. You know, tools like Teams or Zoom are great, but a lot of them, those tools don't really have all of that pre-event and post-event workflow that you really need to have a successful programmatic approach to webinars. Ingredient number 6 is to leverage your webinar content throughout your entire marketing process. So webinars can form the anchor or the foundation of your whole content creation strategy. So if we go back to the discussion earlier around building an editorial calendar, you know, once you establish an editorial calendar for your webinar program, you can then take those webinars and take them in many different directions. So first and foremost, webinars, you can deliver them live. Why does live matter? Live matters. That's the same reason everybody joined on today's call. Live matters because for whatever reason, human beings, we procrastinate. We have a plan to get educated on a topic, and having a live event forces us to get there on time, pay attention, get engaged, and really learn something. And so live never goes away. The other part about live is people like to be a part of the conversation. People like to ask questions. People like to, engage with the actual speakers. And so live has tremendous value. But we also live in a Netflix type world or a YouTube type world where on-demand consumption of content is growing all the time. So you should take your webinar program, record it, post it to your YouTube channel, take the videos, slice them into smaller clips that can be kind of the best of the content that you delivered. And then all of this can feed into your whole video strategy and social media strategy. Post it to your YouTube channel, or if you use something like Vimeo or Wistia, all of this content can then live on your video platforms. It can be used for follow-up marketing and follow-up sales conversations. Of course, social media, again, social media like newsletters, it's like, well, what are we going to talk about? Do we have something to say? Well, if you're hosting a webinar program, you have all of the lead up and all the promotion leading up to the event where you can use your social media platforms as a way to promote the event. And then after you've done the event, you have all of the on-demand content, which you then can promote on your social media platforms. And then to take everything to kind of another level, when you do a webinar, you can then blog about it. You can then add some extra research or data to the conversation and publish a white paper or an ebook on the topic. So really sky's the limit in terms of where you can kind of take this content. And if you think about just from an efficiency perspective, let's just say you do a partner panel discussion. You are going to have to do an interview of your experts on the panel anyway to write that white paper. You might as well host it as a live event, record it, and then you kill two birds with one stone. You produce webinar content, you have an on-demand execution of it, and then you have all the research already done for the white paper or blog you were going to write. So really leverage your webinar program as the anchor for your content program. The last ingredient of success is sales follow-up. I can't stress this enough. I've come across literally dozens of companies over the years where they get started with webinars, they generate a big pile of leads from the event, whether existing clients who need outreach or new prospects, and that Excel spreadsheet sits in somebody's inbox for a week and nobody picks up the phone. Don't let that happen. You're leaving the biggest part of the value on the table by not quickly and persistently following up on the leads you generate from the event and reaching out to folks to find out what they thought about the content. So really everybody who registers for a webinar and or attends, the very next day they should be called. Keep it simple. When you reach them live, all you have to ask is, what did you think of the webinar? And that is just a conversation starter. Whether you're dealing with existing clients, where you're trying to educate them around timely topics around their technology, for instance, or you're dealing with new accounts who are leads, just asking them, what did you learn from the webinar? If they say, I didn't learn anything, well, then you need to go back and work on your content. But invariably, they're going to say, you know what, that was very interesting. I learned X, Y, or Z. And then you have a conversation starter. And then the next obvious question is, well, hey, you thought that engagement with the pen tester was interesting. We have a solution for that, which we call our rapid security assessment. Can I tell you more about our rapid security assessment as an example? So it's really a conversation starter. It's a great way to warm up leads. It's a great way to drive engagement with existing clients, but you have to pick up the phone and do that follow-up work after the event. So that's the last and final ingredient. What I want to do now is turn to your questions. You can go ahead and use the Q&A log. A couple questions have already come in. Let's see here. So let's take one of the first ones here. So Mimi asks, what is the best way to drive registrations? Well, I already gave a couple good ideas, but let me just highlight a couple more. I mean, one of the big challenges that organizations face when you're using your webinar program to go after new accounts is it's really not permissible these days to send mass unsolicited email. So really nobody wants to be spammed. But if you have a very targeted strategy, or for instance, you're doing like an account-based marketing type strategy where you've got a definable list of say a couple dozen or a couple hundred targeted accounts, it's a very worthwhile exercise to do telemarketing with your webinar program as your call to action to those dozens or hundreds of accounts. It's not thousands of people to contact, it's merely dozens or hundreds. And that is very worthwhile work, because if you can get 10 or 20 prospect accounts to register for your webinar program, that's a great signal that there's interest in the topics you're talking about on your webinar program. And it's an extra proof of qualification for those leads. And that's a very worthwhile exercise, in addition to the point I made earlier, which is having your account managers do outreach to existing clients with your webinar program is extremely valuable as well. So let's go to another question. So Nate wants to know, what's a realistic show-up rate? Realistic show-up rate in general is about 40%. So when you do a blended event that has prospects, pipeline accounts, and clients, show-up rate, you should expect around 40% of people to show up live. If you're doing an event that is strictly your clients, you could probably expect somewhere in the range of 55 to 60% show-up rate. So clients, people who have brand affinity for you, who know you and trust you already, those folks are going to show up at a much higher rate. Once you inject prospects into the equation, that yield is going to go down quite a bit. But remember, just because somebody doesn't attend the live session doesn't mean you haven't generated a qualified lead. You've at least shown through their registration that they're interested in the topic. And if they're interested in the topic, they're probably interested in the conversation you want to have. And once somebody registers, then you have a very good excuse to send them a recording of the webinar on demand as a follow-up. And they will, what you'll see over time on your YouTube channel or your other video platforms is that on-demand viewing will grow over the next coming weeks and months, and over time will become like 60 to 70 to 80% of all the consumption of your webinar content you'll see is actually coming from on-demand. So another question from Keith, for MSPs, who are some good joint venture partners? I mentioned several of them, FBI, DHS, university professors. Another one is just to collaborate with other organizations locally. Invite business experts, invite people who have valuable content to contribute, but might be slightly adjacent to what you do as your core business. Let me give you an example. If you're an MSP, you can't do every webinar about cybersecurity. You become kind of a broken record. But what you want to do is kind of mix it up a bit. So MSPs will get a lot of traction and engagement from your audience if you did something like invite in an HR expert or say a recruitment expert and have them give a talk on recruitment best practices targeted at your client, your traditional clientele. That's a great way to bring in somebody who's non-competitive, who has information that's valuable to your audience, that's going to help them solve problems in the areas of managing staff and compensation programs and recruiting and retaining people. And they're your guest and they're able to provide this valuable content, and then you become this magnetic expert in your community of delivering valuable business content to the community. Okay, it looks like we have maybe one more question. So Jennifer asks, what are some good ways to reuse the webinar content? So I guess I'll just double click on one other thing I briefly mentioned, which is take your webinars, listen to them on demand after you have the initial recording, and try to pick out what you would consider like the 2 or 3 best nuggets from the event that really answer a burning question. And it might be a 1-minute clip or a 2-minute clip or a 5-minute clip, and clip that out, record, take that clip, post it to YouTube, and then then you can repeatedly use that in your social media posts and in your sales process down the road. You can create a library of short answers to common questions that your salespeople face every day, and they can use that recorded content in email follow-ups to your clients and prospects. So that's another great way to use this content, inject it into the sales process, and arm your salespeople with a video-based tool that speaks to their problem and does it in a compelling video sort of way. So that's, I think, all the questions we have for now. And let me just conclude by inviting you to reach out if you've gotten value out of today's discussion. Shoot me a note, give me some feedback. If you've had a chance to listen to this on demand, feel free to reach out to me. If you have questions about how to build your own webinar program, I'm more than happy to hop on the phone and give you a free consult and give you some one-on-one advice based upon your own particular needs. And I look forward to engaging with you down the road. So with that, this concludes this month's Iron Path webinar. Advice and counsel for anyone who's looking to start their own webinar program. Hopefully you've gotten some good ideas here and some value and can put it into practice in your business. And with that, thank you for joining us for the live session and have a great day.